Hey, good evening to you. Mark Seth with HurricaneTrack.com. I guess I should say good morning. It is 12:40 a.m. as I record this. I'm in Daytona Beach, Florida, back from Puerto Rico where not much happened at all as what became Hurricane Dorian passed by on Wednesday. Now it's early Thursday morning. It was definitely worth the trip down there. You learn from these things. We got to meet several awesome people, including one of our patrons on Patreon. His name is Carlos, and he helped out a lot. So a huge thank you to Carlos for helping us. You do what you got to do. In this job, you never know what you're going to get. And in this case, Dorian went to the east of Puerto Rico, which was a pretty big surprise, I think, and gave the Virgin Islands really the brunt of the action. And the Virgin Islands happens to be where we have a permanent nest cam set up at one of our other patrons' house. His name is Brent. He is one of our assistants as well. And this is the nest cam time-lapse from today from his place. Check this out. Early in the morning, you're looking towards the south and southwest generally, and you can see the way the flow would be, that the clouds would be streaming in and coming over from the north. And so he's kind of protected where he is from any kind of onshore flow in this situation. This is the Fish Bay area in St. John. You can see the feeder bands come across, the rapid movement of the clouds, and then these squalls come in, and it gets pretty windy, kind of rocking and rolling in there. St. Thomas, St. Martin were hit pretty hard, and you saw some of that video, I'm sure, on social media today. Bulk of the hurricane, and at this point it was a hurricane moving across the region, moves out, and then as it goes past, the flow comes kind of at the camera, and you can see that coming onshore there, the beautiful Caribbean over there in the distance, that blue turquoise color, and then the muddy kind of look to the bay down there as these guts, they call them guts down there, these little streams bring sediment all down into that little bay down there, right there. This gets kind of muddy. But that's the time-lapse, rather fascinating. This is a permanent camera that we have set up down in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We had two cameras set up over here in the San Juan area, and Carlos took those down for us. Nothing much happened with those because Dorian tracked up through this area, generally speaking, and now it's sitting over here. That's a rough idea of the track. Kind of a dry slot moving into this, as you can see right in here. Still some drier air around, but now that the inner core is very well developed, it's going to take an awful lot to disrupt this. And as it moves away from the landmass of Puerto Rico and out over the true open water where all that upper ocean heat content is waiting, it's going to mix out this dry air. You're going to see this come and go. And as it turns the corner eventually and heads more towards the Bahamas, generally speaking, upper ocean heat content will increase. That's the available heat energy in the upper part of the ocean, not just at the skin, but below, and a lot of heat energy to tap into. The atmosphere is going to be more moist there, so this little sort of downturn in the overall satellite presentation is not representative of what's going on. We can see radar still out of San Juan. I was looking at it on radar scope. In fact, let me just bring that up and show you real quick. There we go. All right, so you can see the core there. Hopefully, it's kind of bright. It's got a very well intact, very well developed center, and it's getting farther away from the radar site. Still some squalls moving over parts of the Virgin Islands tonight, but nothing too substantial as compared to what you had earlier today. But look at this deep fetch of moisture with this one feeder band, definitely trying to pull in moisture, but there is still some dry air around, certainly. And once it mixes that out and really gets itself out over the open Atlantic, it's going to be probably all systems go for this to become a major hurricane. Now, I want to show you the latest GFS. This is from the Tropical Tidbits site, and this is a different type of map than you're used to me showing. This shows us the isobars at the surface, our mean sea level pressure that are That's indicated by these lines. These are your isobars, lines of equal pressure. This is the low pressure area, not much of it, that was once tropical. I'm looking over there. I was trying to look at, anyway. This was once Aaron, and here's Dorian down here, probably initialized a little too high on the pressure side, but that's fine. It doesn't matter much. And then what we see, this is kind of an upper level low punching a hole a little bit into the ridge, and that's what this is. This is your geopotential height in the atmosphere, and this is that ridge of high pressure that I talk about. And overall, watch how this changes over time, and Dorian comes up. I'm going to use the arrows on here. Levi's got a good setup to where I believe if I click on this, let's go back. Very good. So we can use the arrows and kind of go through time. This is the analysis, this is the initial time, and you can see how this goes through this ridge of high pressure, this orange up here, orangish red. That is what is helping to keep this squashed down here instead of just floating up, so to speak, and going out to sea, that western Atlantic ridge. And these heights in the atmosphere are important. And just notice, it's hard to draw and telestrate it and do the arrows at the same time. Notice the thickness of this, and I mean from north to south, not the thickness in the atmosphere. That's a different thing. But just kind of watch as this goes along here. This is 48 hours out. I'm just going to play with the arrow keys. Now you see it heads up towards the Georgia-Florida border near Brunswick, maybe Jacksonville. But let's back it up and kind of speed it up, and you see what happens. The ridge is fairly stout at about hour 48. You can see it's nice and thick through here, even an area of 594 height showing up. That means the atmosphere is nice and robust, keeping Dorian moving along where it would generally turn to the west if that ridge stayed intact. But it doesn't. It starts to thin at about hour 72, because it shows here this little piece of energy coming in, and it starts to thin out the ridge to the north, and Dorian's going to punch a hole in it anyway coming in from the south. But that little bit of energy that starts to dip in there coming out of Kentucky and West Virginia, watch right through here. Now the ridge, the distance between points here of the ridge, and I'm trying to make this simple for you to understand, and Levi Cowan could give you the meteorological, mathematical physics behind it. I'm going to try to translate it, and neither one of us is better than the other. Well, he's certainly smarter than me. I'm going to definitely give him that. But he's got a way to explain things, and I have a way of explaining things, and neither one of them is necessarily the best. All right? That's what I'm saying. We complement each other, and there are other people out there that do these types of updates as well. But explaining the meteorological part of it versus what we're looking at in terms of how you can understand it, that's what I'm trying to go for here. And when I see this, and this is just what I watch, how it thins out through here, that allows Dorian to gain more latitude. It goes more poleward, as we say. And it's really thin there. That trough, a little bit of energy in here, has really thinned out the ridge. So there's less keeping it pushed to the south. That's what this means, okay? And as we go through time, it ends up fairly thin right there. It almost breaks the ridge, and eventually it does overall. Get back over here. The ridge will break, and it comes on up right there. It's broken, and now it's inland over Georgia, according to the GFS. So if we go back, watch how that evolves. It comes up out of the Caribbean, and it's gaining some latitude now in these next few hours. This is hour 6, 12, but then the ridge thickens. You see that there, that darkish orange color. And in fact, it grows enough right there at about hour 48 again, where we get the 594 height line over there to the north and east of Dorian. 10-20 millibars at the surface there. You see that blue. And it stays pretty thick. Now, if this stays thick like this and connected all the way across, Dorian will come up and come in something like that. That is what would keep it farther to the south. If that ridge stays nice and thick in the atmosphere, and on the map here, looking at it in this fashion, it steers Dorian more towards the west and eventually the south. And if we start seeing more of this color up here, the 590, well, if we give a 600 decameter height line, I mean, holy cow. But this color here, this deep red, and if we see this purple, I mean, it shows over, it's coming across way south. But we're not seeing that yet, at least not from this model. But watch what happens as we go through time. That's 54 hours. And the ridge does not stay intact. It starts to thin right there as that energy starts to drop south and east out of the Great Lakes region. And it thins out the ridge enough that it comes in there to northeast Florida is what it comes down to. Now, let's juxtapose this to, let's go to the 96-hour, there we go. Let's see where the Euro from 12Z today, this is 12 hours ago now, where it had it in around 96 hours. They're about 12 hours difference. The Euro doesn't have as many frames, whatever, it's hard to explain all this, but this is an approximation. That's a pretty big difference. And you see at 96 hours, the ridge is thicker through here in the Euro. It's still connected fairly thick all the way across, big heat ridge all the way out to the Four Corners region and beyond. Whereas the GFS has this energy that seems to be coming in right here. In fact, let me just see something. Come on, this is how I analyze things, right? I'm just recording what I would be already looking at myself. Let's look over what we call the CONUS here, which is the lower 48 roughly, and you see that energy there. Let's scroll this back up so I can get my pointers. So we see it coming in. We'll back it up to 24 hours out. So this is valid Thursday night, this coming evening. And watch, you see how things flatten out up to the north. The stream flow up here generally flattens out, and that allows the ridge to build in. But watch what happens here as we go through time. That little piece of energy, almost think of it like a magnet coming down there. And where's my bottle top to my Dasani? They give me this at the hotel. Dorian's coming along, like that. It's spinning along, and it's going this way. And then that little trough digs in. It's like a magnet, attracting it. It's almost like that, even though it's not magnetism. That trough digging in like that weakens the ridge enough to bring it northward, and then it just kind of keeps going. The ridge stays fairly thin, so it does not have an impetus to turn back to the west. You see that very clearly. All right? So, it flattens out early on as this first piece of energy lifts out, part of that left over from what was once Aaron, and you can see that right in here, and a little bit of troughiness over here that's helping to boot the remnants of Aaron out. That gets out of the way, lifts out, the ridge thickens. Dorian goes west to west-northwest for a good bit there, from hour 48 through 72 and 78. By 84, it starts to gain latitude because of this little shortwave piece of energy. And it is just a little small piece of energy. It's not one of these long digging troughs that you get later into September. And then it connects just barely, the little bridge here, to this big massive heat ridge that's keeping it hot, although there has been some monsoonal action out here. But they're connected. So the more they're connected and the thicker this is, the more Dorian goes to the west. If that little short wave digs in and acts like a magnet, it's going to lift Dorian more north or allow it to gain latitude. And if it does so more, there's two things here to think about. If this trough is stronger and sooner, then Dorian turns more to the north sooner. It could end up near the Carolinas, certainly. If the trough isn't really even there, it doesn't dig as far south, and that ridge is thicker for 24 hours longer, Dorian would be farther to the south, near South Florida. And even the potential is there for it to cut across extreme South Florida and on into the Gulf of Mexico. And that reminds me, I wanted to show you the guidance here from the 18Z GFS ensembles, which do hint at that just a little bit. This is the ensemble guidance from this afternoon's run. And look at this. I'm going to zoom in on it. Some of those models there, look at these runs down here. These are different members of the GFS ensemble camp. They are over extreme South Florida, and then they turn north as far west as New Orleans, the 90 degrees west longitude. Why? Not so much, oh wow, what's coming my way. Ask yourselves why. Why is that showing that? And you can see the general outline of what would be a very stout ridge in here causes this to come up. It can't go through that, so it goes around it. That's the very simple explanation for that, at least what I see. These other members of the ensemble package, this one shows a much weaker ridge overall. And then there are many, many, many other variations of that, as you can clearly see. Which one of these will be right? I don't know. If I did, I would definitely tell you. And I don't mean to smile about it, because it is, for sure a very serious thing, but I don't know the answers. Consider this, and I tweeted about this earlier. The National Hurricane Center issues 4 main advisory packages each day. 11 a.m. is just my starting time. It could be 5 a.m., but it's 11 a.m., 5 p.m., 11 p.m., 5 a.m. 4 main packages, unless there's something that comes along and they have to have a special update. And then they do these intermediate advisories when there's a watch or a warning issued, roughly every 3 hours. So 4 main advisories every 6 hours. Over the next 5 days, 4 times 5 is 20. I'm not so tired that I can't remember that. That's a lot of forecasts that are each going to have subtle changes. They're not all going to be identical. And then just further out in time extrapolated, no, they're going to change. Those points, the cone is going to change 20 times between now and 5 days out. 19 times whatever, since we had one just a little while ago at 11 p.m. You get the idea? And each one of those, the forecaster, the one that wrote it tonight is Dr. Richard Pash. They have to interpret all of this that I just showed you and more. They look at that and more. And I don't envy them. That's all I'm going to say. That's like, wow. I'm just discussing this from a different point of view. Again, I'm a geographer. I'm a physical geographer. I study meteorology, earth science, statistics, and hurricane impacts. What do hurricanes do when they hit land and affect people? That is my specialty. So I try to interpret this in terms of how I would try to figure it out for my own field work in the end. And like I said, I just kind of record this and broadcast it to you as a recording so that I can expand, hopefully, your knowledge base. But imagine what they have to go through at the Hurricane Center, interpreting all these different scenarios. And they're going to do this at least 20 times over the next 5 days. So a lot to keep up with. No simple answers just yet, but a few things to look for. So I'm going to try to go to sleep here in just a little bit. It's knocking on the door of 1 a.m. Eastern Time. Get up in the morning around 8:30 Eastern. Got some things I got to do here with updates and whatnot. And let's see what the Euro shows. I'll do another update before I hit the road again with Brent and we get our way back to North Carolina. But that's the key. Let's see how stout that ridge is, how thick it is, and what that shows with Dorian. Is the Euro going to start showing a thinner ridge, or is it going to hold strong and send Dorian more to the south? We'll just have to wait and see. See if I can make me disappear. There I go. Hey, thanks for tuning in. I know it's really late. I hope the alert that gets sent out when this becomes public on YouTube didn't wake you up. And if it did, hey, I appreciate you watching, especially if it woke you. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. I do appreciate you watching and all of your support. It's wonderful. And I will have more for you. We'll call it around 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.